Welcome, my name is Rafael, the Renaissance Gremlin, and I just sculpted the Berserk.
Why?
The main reason of making this creature was that while reading Berserk, I said Berserk multiple times, and of course I was not the first one to came with this idea, and I just thought that making a Berserk sculpture will be funny. And that was also good enough reason to bring him to the biggest miniature painting competition in Poland, which is actually even bigger than I expected, because with each edition this becomes more of the multinational competition. And among those beautiful painted minis, I put 25 cm piece of Shrek. And the event I am talking about is Contrast Festival in Warsaw. It was miniature painting contest, so to surprise of absolutely no one, he got no prizes. But it was eye-catching and absurd just enough to say that I completed what I wanted. So for next edition of Contrast, I'm probably gonna bring something serious instead of a joke entry. So if you would like to see that next serious project or other weird stuff like this, you can leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Even though this sculpture was a joke to begin with, while making him I had in mind that I'm gonna put him out for contest. So it was both a joke and a tryhard project at the same time. So he is one of my most detailed sculptures up to this date. Thanks to bringing him up to the contest, I realized that I want to paint better. I really want to connect the hobbies of sculpting and miniature painting, so when I'm gonna reach the point when I can say that I know what I'm doing while sculpting, so in the future maybe I could start making models that will be scanned and 3D printed or recasted. But to reach that point, I feel that I have to improve both as sculptor and miniature painter. And this channel will become a record of my journey of getting there. So my next sculpture is probably not gonna be 25 centimeters high. I'm gonna tone it down to something like 15 centimeters, so I could focus on refining the details and overall smoothness of the final sculpt. And of course I had to record this line again, because I said 50 instead of 15. And speaking of my next sculpting project, it's either gonna be Senshi from Dungeon Meshi or something from Elden Ring. And speaking of Elden Ring, Shrek cosplaying Guts is basically typical player character of any From Software game. So of course, to prepare for DLC, I made a new character and named it BERSHREK. This is not the first Shrek cosplaying other characters that I've done, and for sure it's not the last one. First one was Shrek cosplaying Jotaro. I have done him 3 years ago, so of course it was time for another Shrek, and for sure that's not the last one. Probably next 2 or 3 years I'm gonna make a Shrek cosplaying character from one of others of my favorite mangas. And if nothing's gonna change, this is probably gonna be the Chainsaw Shrek. Today, while I'm recording audio, we just got a chapter 168 from Chainsaw Man that I'm not gonna talk about because getting a random spoiler from Chainsaw Man manga at the video of Sculpting Berserk will be beyond absurd. I really had great references for this project because one of my favorite sculpting YouTubers, Dr. Garuda, made both Berserk and Shrek. So all I have to do was to connect those two sculptures. And you can see the result. sword was the biggest mess in this entire project. The original idea was to make Shrek in God's Golden Age armor, so the sword was supposed to be a way smaller. Meanwhile, the balance of the entire sculpt relies on the sword, so when I remade the sword, the entire balance was gone. The hand broke at least 3 times, and after the bake with the stable hand, he was unable to stand on his own. From this point I have the really big unwieldy piece of Shrek. Looking at the timeline, until this point I said almost nothing about the sculpture itself, and it was more of random bullshit go. All of those belts were really satisfying to sculpt, but they were terrible to paint, especially if you plan to do something more than slap the metallic on them. Usually I have no idea how to record sculpting faces because I like to keep them in my hand, but this time I managed to record most of the sculpting process. At least for the face of Shrek, because for the face of Lord Farquaad, that will appear as part of base as a broken statue, I only took the pictures of him. Last time when I have done bust, it was Lae'zel, when I mostly had to remind myself how faces actually work. In the end, Lae'zel took me like 3 months to complete, while making a bust of Lord Farquaad took less than 3 hours. And I think that Lord Farquaad actually looks better than my Lae'zel. Face of our frog lady was quite complicated. Meanwhile, Lord Farquaad has one of the easiest faces that I ever sculpted. And here is another part that I forgot to record, which is the donkey as a pack. Original idea was to make him a lot smaller and put him on top of the Shrek shoulder. But then I got the idea that bigger donkey will be funnier, and I placed him sitting at the bottom of his cape. And that was terrible idea. Putting him at this point made him almost impossible to paint. I should have painted the donkey separately and then connected him to the cape with glue or something like epoxy putty. Because I baked him already on top of the cape, it was nearly impossible to get the right angle to paint him. At this point it was like 2 days before the contrast, so I had 2 days to paint a gigantic 25 centimeters Shrek. So because of that, most of the paint job is basically just speed paints and dry brushing. Part I took most effort with was his skin, and the tutorial I liked the most was by Dr. Faustus. His technique was starting from yellow undercoat, so this is why you see the Shrek with yellow face. And actually making this boost of Lord Farquaad made me realize that Shrek's chin is way too small. So in the middle of painting process I started to fixing his jawline. because Shrek has to look like a proper Giga Chat that he is. This is the first sculpture that I ever used 3 types of clay, because I used polymer clay for basically the whole Shrek, air dry clay for the base, and epoxy putty that can be considered as a budget epoxy clay. And epoxy putty is the material that I know thanks to getting into miniature painting hobby. And without it, most of this sculpture won't be even possible. Following the technique from the Dr. Faustus tutorial, I tried to get the right skin tone by multiple glazes. I'm pretty happy with how it looks, but I know it can be done better. Especially that after contrast I was exposed to multiple painting styles that I for sure gonna try in a future projects. And that's basically all that I had to say about this sculpture. So now I will leave you with beautiful music by Jonathan Young on his channel Dungeon Playlist, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.